It's fantastic to be here, to see so many people. I've had a chance to chat to a few of you. And it's brilliant to be in a place of sanity, actually, to meet people who actually see the world right. This week, I don't know if any of you saw a case. The last few days I've been just thinking about this. It was 1,000 people turned up in Berlin, and they all identified as dogs. And I don't know if you saw that. You know, they were all howling. It was like something from a zombie apocalypse or I Am Legend. Or it was just the weirdest, freakiest thing. It makes you think, what on earth has happened to our world? The world has gone genuinely insane. And I might touch on some of the points of why that has happened. But it makes you realise that we have a big job. All of you in this room have some part to play in changing this world. The world has gone badly wrong. And there are not many people who seem to be awake to the reality of it. All of you could have done lots of things this weekend, but you've chosen to come to a pro-life conference. You've chosen to stand up for the right to life, which should be something that's recognised by everyone. Something that was a few decades ago would have been natural to understand every human life. When you see a precious little child, the thought that anyone would want to do something to harm it is just quite incredible. But that's the sort of world we live in. So thank you for doing that. Whether you've been here for over 50 years, as we had this morning, or whether this is your first pro-life event, we're all united by that vision that we want to make the world a better place. And I think what you're going to do over this weekend is learn that we have a lot of initiatives that will give you something that you can work on, so you can go away. There are some people who are up for being martyrs, but it's quite hard to be a martyr. But there are some simple things you could do that fit in with your life that will make the difference. And that's what we're going to learn over this weekend. So we're living at a time of moral confusion. The dog one was a particularly shocking one for me, just to think, what have we come to where we're actually reducing ourselves to be animals? And when you go out now, I don't know if I've noticed this. One of my daughters recently said she was on a train and there were hardly any seats, so she got up and gave a seat to a woman with a pram. But when the pram arrived, she looked in and it was a dog in the pram. You know, this is the... She wanted to ask for her seat back. But this is the level of confusion that we have, and the consequences for it are dire, because the reality is there is a cast iron law, an ABC of consequences, which is if you change people's attitudes, you change the behaviour and you get consequences. And we have dramatically changed the attitudes of the people in this country over the last few decades, and the pace of change is just accelerating. I started working for the bishops in 1999, thinking I was going to do pro-life work. Actually, I thought that was that would be the focus. I didn't know I would be facing a tsunami in terms of the whole LGBT movement and where that has gone. And my biggest problem always was that no one would believe the scale of their ambition. And I was fortunate in those early days just to think, well, where do you start? So I started to read what their ambitions were and look at some of the campaign ideas that they had and how quickly they brought about that change. So in the 80s, they formed their associations and they said, we need to change the world. The world needs to be turned upside down. And so they detailed how they did it. And we've seen the same with the environmental movement. They have done the same, and they document. The thing about these groups is they document how they do it. And they've done it very effectively. And we need to learn from them, and we need to do the same. Now, we may have different views on all sorts of political issues, but when the world thinks that killing the innocent, when the world thinks that a baby fully formed dying is an excuse to call for even more abortion, when we have women receiving pills of poison to their doors to kill their babies in their bedrooms, society is deeply, deeply disturbed, and something has gone deeply wrong, and someone needs to fix it. Now, in the civilization that preceded us in the Roman Empire, you would hear, when you're in history, you talk about, oh, why did people put up with the slavery and all these sorts of things? And they talk about, oh, well, they just kept them docile with bread and circuses. we're seeing the same, except it's not bread and circuses, it's Deliveroo and Netflix. Someone, Mary, I was chatting to last night, said about, if people could just give up their televisions. But if you look in any train or any bus or even a bus stop or anywhere where people are, they're absolutely engrossed in their own televisions in their hand. And it seems to be sucking their brains out. And somebody needs to do something about it. In recent times of pro-lifers, Calvin last night touched on some of the challenges we're facing, that we can't even pray now. People are saying, oh, well, you might be allowed to do silent prayer, but, surely we should be able to say prayer out loud. Surely we should be able to assemble. Surely we should be allowed to express ourselves freely and tell people what our opinions are. Surely we should be allowed to participate in discussions about issues in our society without being vilified. Now, last century, we saw the manifestations of a terrible evil that shocked the whole world. And at the Nuremberg trials, they decided that the masterminds of that had to lose their lives. So the people were held responsible. But after it, they said, well, we need to build something better so we can never do that again. And there are some values which are so important that it doesn't matter who says they will not be respected. It doesn't matter. The world will unite and we will defend those rights. And they identified it. So there was great excitement. Eleanor Roosevelt led the group that pioneered pulling together people of all faiths, all sorts of philosophies, from different economic backgrounds, from different countries, all around the world. And they presented the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. And that was seen as this foundational document to create this world where human rights would be respected. But in the last few years, we've seen the absolute collapse of them. That genuinely, you will say that people are not allowed to have a voice because you disagree with them. We've got the whole cancel culture. I mean, that we genuinely feared that this event could have been cancelled because it got cancelled last year in Glasgow. We had an event recently. Tom was putting on some dramas in a theatre, and the theatre tried to cancel on us. We did events in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, cancelled, simply because they said our values are unacceptable. People who think killing babies are unacceptable in our society, we need to do something about it. If society loses sight of these basic realities, the consequences are stark. And for all of us, the fact that you are here probably means two things. One is your brain works in such a way that reason is your priority. So you can prioritize reason. Most people can't do that. For others, it also is that you may have a reference point outside of our culture. Lots of people say, oh, the pro-life movement is a religious movement. And it is because so many people are religious and they see it. But the thing about religions that have been here for centuries is they've reflected on the big challenges of humanity for all of those years, for centuries. And they've arrived at a set of values that actually is true. So they can see that truth. It's a reference point. But if you're inside society, the chances are, unless you're very able, very open-minded, and capable of reasoning, the chances are you just go with the flow. And look where the flow has gone. Look on YouTube at that group of people in Berlin howling like dogs. It's absolutely terrifying. And that's what happens if you just think, let it go. Hey, live and let live. So we said that we've seen this demise over the last few centuries, but the pace of change is absolutely enormous. And the consequences can be seen in the statistics. Now, there are many. The world always has challenges. Always has challenges. Look at the numbers, the millions lost by abortion. But if we compare, if by every cause, look, the numbers are shocking to lose lives, and people want to respond to challenges of life. But let's look at a comparison. Abortion dwarfs every other thing. Now, the biggest other killer is cardiovascular disease. You know, but it's not something that people are deliberately going out and killing people, stopping their hearts, damaging their hearts. A lot of that is self-inflicted just by lifestyles. And actually because we live so long now. Death from cancer, a terrible illness, and the world is absolutely united to try and fight it. Deaths from hunger, you know, that has been plummeting, deaths from hunger, because the world is united and said, we need to stop this. Surely we cannot have this abundance and at the same time allowing people to die of hunger. It cannot be right. Let's fix it. But the figures on abortion just keep rising. 73 million. It's the UN, give that number. And I was shocked when I went on to the World Health Organization, which is part of the UN. The World Health Organization, they actually say that 29% of pregnancies end in abortion. 29%. It's absolutely staggering. So our society has chosen to kill itself. Can move off that slide now. John, thank you. A lot of us respond by trying to tell people the truth. So we tell them, you know, isn't this shocking? You know, look how developed a baby is. But our politicians or people in the media, they saw the reality. Baby Carla Foster was fully developed, 8 months in pregnancy, and she died because she was sent. Her mum took pills that were delivered to her in the post. The response of those politicians is, we need more of this. We need to allow this at any stage. No one should ever have to give account for ending the life of an innocent child. It's actually quite staggering. Jonathan Swift once said, reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion, which by reason he never acquired. And that's important because we're trying to reason with people and they don't have their views because they reasoned it. They didn't think through to get there. How could they have? What sort of perverse mind could take them there? It's not been that. It's got even worse, though, in the centuries since Swift's time. Alistair McIntyre did an amazing study on moral reasoning in his great book that came out in the 80s, After Virtue. Now, in that, McIntyre concludes with the terrifying assessment when he looks at where we have arrived. He was trying to explore how we actually conduct moral debate. And he realised we've got to the point now in our society where it's actually emotivism, he calls it. People do not actually use reason anymore, they use emotivism. And that's why you will see in any debate now, if you disagree with someone, if you say, oh, well, you can't identify as a dog, they will say, if you say that, people who feel their dogs will commit suicide. Because that's the trump card now in emotivism. Emotivism is, I've got to out-emotion you. So you might say, oh, well, people might be hurt by that, or people's feelings might be hurt. But if they can say, well, if we don't allow children to say they want to change gender, they'll all kill themselves. That's emotivism. And they don't look at reasoning. But Alistair McIntyre concluded his books by saying, the barbarians are not waiting beyond the frontiers. They have already been governing us for quite some time. Now, that was in the 80s. That's when I was young, I used to think, oh, politicians were statesmen. They actually understood issues and they could think and they could debate and they were reasoned. So think in the intervening years, I've lost track of the time. When Emmett was going through those years, I thought, my goodness, how many years have I been doing this? So the 80s, the music was good in the 80s. That's when I grew up in school. But it was a long time ago now when you add up the numbers. So how much has it changed? Because what has been happening in those intervening years is we have advanced in some ways. We've advanced in our science and our technology. But that now is a tool in the hands of people who, in terms of their moral perspective, are barbarians. And there has been a huge advance in the understanding of human psychology in these recent decades. What they know about the human mind would blow your mind. It's actually amazing. They can They can figure out what you want to buy or what you would buy before you've even thought about it. You know, think of all the salesmen. They could sell. It used to be like when I was young. They could sell sand to the Arabs. You know, they could sell you anything they want. They could nurture in you any emotion they want, because they've done research now that shows your manipulations, they can be manipulated without you ever being aware that they're actually manipulated. So the simple things you could do, and the simple I won't go into. I do give a talk on this whole thing. It lasts an hour. So if you're interested, call me to your branch meeting and I'll go through it in detail. They can do simple things. So some sneaky things you do are a wee bit more obvious. But for example, in debates on television, what they can do is, if they've got a particular candidate, they can get the opposing candidate's supporters behind them. So on the camera, when you see the person giving the answers, you see the faces behind, and they're all shaking their faces, and you subconsciously absorb that. And what happens is you start to add red or green flags to someone when you see them. And this apparently happens in every interaction you have in your life. You're always assessing things, and you're saying red flag, red, green, 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 green. So that is used now to manipulate you to have particular positions. And it's also used to cancel people without you knowing why you hate them. You know, so people turn up on TV and go, I hate that guy, I wonder why. You know, but they've presented it in such a way, the colouring, the angle, they can do things like that. So that's used. So it's used by salesmen. But what happens if it's used by politicians or people who have ambitions that are wicked? They can use that to get us to believe anything. Now, the thing that's happened, we've seen in government in the last couple of decades, and the last decade, I suppose, in the UK, is we've started to implement that in policy. And they'll do it in stuff that sounds like, well, we're just helping people make the right decisions. So they've got this whole nudge theory. So some of you have spoken to me that before. So you can look into that. It's looking at the behaviour of people and how do we just make them behave in a different way from the way they're behaving just now. So just one of the people behind that is a particular book, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. You could read the detail of it, but to encapsulate their work, they say nudges are not mandates. They are ways of influencing choices while preserving freedom of choice. So you think, so there's very simple ways. I don't know, in supermarkets, some supermarkets find, well, why does no one ever go to that particular area of the shop? And we're not selling enough vegetables or whatever it is. So what they then thought, well, actually, do you know what? See, if you put footprints that lead people to that area of the shop, they'll follow them. And so it's stuff like that. So you think, oh, I've got freedom of choice. Of course you do. But someone has just tilted the ground, and you think, oh, well, I'll follow those. And you end up at the aisle of, you never wanted to buy anything from there, and you suddenly go away, and suddenly you're buying them. So the power of that is absolutely huge. Now imagine you had that, people behind that, and they control TikTok. Have you seen the pace of people? Have you seen now people are absolutely addicted to TikTok? There's that the woman, I forget her name, who fell into the river recently. There was a documentary the other night about this. You know, all these TikTokers were turning up at the murder scene, you know, because they just wanted hits, and they were turning up and sneaking around the caravan site and to their followers just to get TikTok hits. There's something, so they know that they can get the human brain to want to get hits. Oh, I need some more, or it used to be Facebook, you know, I need some more likes, or the kids are all on TikTok and the various other things that I lose track of. So when you're young, your brain can remember all those things. That's why Catherine and William are in charge of that and not me. So anyway, our society seems to be using this power to commit suicide. There seem to be people running the show for whatever reason. Now, you could call it a conspiracy theorist now on just about anything. If there's a view they don't want, that conspiracy theory, or that whole terminology was actually created by the CIA. There's a whole, you can read up on that. They had to create something you could say, how do we get people to stop thinking about that? Something. So they did this campaign to actually create that tag, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. As if people can't conspire. When you work with someone and say, let's do this, that's you conspiring to do something. So anyway, there seems to be a conspiracy theory to kill mankind. They seem to be doing it at every single issue. You can't pick up a paper without seeing some ecological disaster, and actually it means we need less people. Too many people in the world. It's a nightmare. We need to get rid of some of them. So they seem to be doing this, and there's a particular powerful analysis of civilizations that was done by Arnold Toynbee. He's famous, but and people debate the detail of what he says, but it's fairly accurate. But in his look at something like 23 civilizations that ever existed in the world, he comes to the conclusion that civilizations die from suicide, not from murder. Is that okay saying murder with a Scottish accent? If you ever go to the States, they'll come over to you and say murder. So I'll try and say it without murder. Now, one of the other realities, one of the other insights that Toynbee found for us was that is true. Societies do die by suicide, but they typically have gone through a similar life cycle. So that they've gone through a life cycle where people gathered together with a strong vision of how they wanted to live and values that they held dear and were willing to live by that united them, and it allowed their society to flourish. But in their prosperity, they start to lose sight of what it was that actually allowed them to flourish. And they take it for granted, and they lose their discipline. And they can't be bothered, to be honest, is the reality. They lose the zeal, the dynamism that allowed that society to flourish. My daughter was telling me recently about some friends of hers. They were chatting about what if you were to die right now. And she was shocked, really, that they all went, well, I wouldn't be here to worry about it. And she was saying, well, but what about all your ambitions, all the things that you want to do? Well, I wouldn't be here, so. And what about your family, how distraught they would be and how sad? Well, I mean, but I know I won't be here to see it, so there's something really, there is a nihilism in our culture that people just genuinely don't want to live. It's, no wonder John Paul II named it a culture of death. A culture that genuinely thinks death is a good thing, doesn't see it as a bad thing. Whereas we've benefited from living in a society which was a culture of life that identified what is it that makes humanity prosper and flourish. And last night Eden asked a good question about how do we impart these values to people who are non-believers. Well, we can do it by witness. That is one way of doing it. But it appeals to the human heart and the human mind. There are ways that are, for any of you want, you can just get a summary of it. Look up John Finnis on natural law and natural rights. He identifies natural goods. There are natural goods that if you look at how people behave in society, every human in the right circumstances, when they're free from particular pressures, they all identify certain things as good. And one of them is life. People know that living is a good thing. No matter the challenges, we want to live. We are a people of life that knows how wonderful it is to be alive. And our society today has lost that. I'll die today, who cares? How can that be true? How can we have created fellow citizens who have that attitude? Something is deeply wrong. But there are so few of us is the challenge. Can we move on to the slide here? I thought our way to get an idea of how challenging this is. Now, there are challenges. I like to read a lot about challenges throughout history. There's lots of challenging things in history, and people have done remarkable things. Individuals have done remarkable things. I love, anyone read Shackleton? Ernest Shackleton's, read that account. Unbelievable. Anyway, I'm not a Shackleton, I wish I were. But This is the reality of the challenge we're facing right now. In monetary terms, so just as an indicator of how interested people are in an issue. That's how much people give to good causes in the UK on the left. And on the right is how much is pro-life income. Now, actually, I've cheated a wee bit because I actually got all the pro-life organisations, I got their income, and then I just doubled it. And even then, it's actually just a stain in the bottom of the chart. It looks like nobody cares. That is the challenging reality. However, we're here this weekend. You've chosen this weekend to do something about it. You could have done anything. And sometimes one person can make a difference. So read that Shackleton book. Honestly, it's absolutely incredible. His Endurance, it's called. Anyway, that's one thing. But I'll ask you now, think about that. Is there a time, it doesn't matter what it was about, maybe when you're on a school board or talking to friends at church or at work, where you've been able to be a voice that made a difference? Just one thing you said, just think about it for a few seconds. A time, it may have been a small time, but you had the chance to just be a witness for the truth or for a good. And think about the feeling that you would have when you knew you did the right thing. Now, I remember in 2000, I was at a training event for pro-lifers in 2000 in Strasbourg, and I was sitting chatting to this young guy, and it turned out he was a medic, and it's second year medicine or something like that. So I was chatting. I said, "Well, how did you get involved in this?" And he pointed over to the guy, and he said, "Oh, because of that guy over there." I said, "Oh, what happened?" And he said, "We were in a first year medicine lecture." He said 500 people were there, and the professor was at front chatting about something, and he had a picture of a disabled baby, newly born, and he was talking about what the conditions were, and he was pointing out this and that and the next thing. And he said, of course, it should have been aborted. And the 500 students were in silence. And one voice said, "I disagree." And it was that guy who was there. Now, because of his witness, he said lots of people went to him. He said, "I went to that guy." He said, and lots of us did in the class because he was a witness. And he got involved in the pro-life movement because of that one guy. That one voice stood up. Now, one of the insights from Toynbee is that society actually is guided by voices like that. Society is actually guided by minorities. The masses actually go with the flow. And the minorities are the ones who change things. Now, he identifies two different kinds of minorities. There is the creative minority, and he said the creative minorities come along at the start of a civilization. They give it energy, they give it the zeal, they give it the vision, and they lead, and they're doing it for everyone. He identifies what he calls the dominant minority, and the dominant minority are those at the end. They're those when society starts to fall apart. They have the position, the power, the influence, and they use it for themselves. They just want to advance themselves. They have the opportunity to do that. Now, I suggest we're living at a time when we have a dominant minority running this society for whatever benefits. They're hard to imagine, and no wonder people create conspiracy theories. Some of them will be true, some of them will be false. It doesn't matter. People are running this society to the abyss. They're taking us to the edge. We will not survive if we have human beings that think it's better to be a dog than actually a person who, in my view, is made in the image of God, to live for eternity, to flourish and do so much. And there are people from every tradition. You don't need to be a believer to see that, to see the value and the heroism and the dignity of human beings and what they can do. And people want to do that. It's as if they're living in a life now of ash. Deliveroo and Netflix and TikTok. But we're made for better than that. Human beings are capable of so much more. Now, the reality is, the tipping point for change is not that big. It doesn't need a lot of people to do it. So if one voice can make a difference, then what if we can pull together lots of voices? What if we can work coordinated? You're in this room today, and look at the number of us. It's hard to get meetings. We ran that event at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and people are putting on shows all over the place. You think, oh, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to do a show at the Edinburgh Fringe. Do you know what the average attendance at a show at the Fringe is? It used to be 6. I think it's gone down, Tom. What is it now? Is it 4? People don't care. You know, people don't care if they die today or not. So there's actually not that many of them. There's more of us who can actually do something. And what we are doing at SPUC, and I hope you will learn this weekend, is we're doing it in so many areas that are going to make the difference. We are going to build the critical mass. We are going to be the tipping point that turns this mess around. And there's so many ways that we can do it. There's so many easy ways we can do it. Over the last couple of years at SPUC, we've started to chart out, well, how do we get there? What would we need to do if we wanted to create that critical mass and be that tipping point? How could we do it? And we've identified some particular targets. Now, every one of our teams, hopefully they'd only be jesting, but they say, oh no, our targets again. Every week they meet and we look at our targets. Everyone has a meeting every week. They make commitments. And what is my commitment this week? To improve our target. So we've done that. So there are team ones, but there are some global ones for SPUC. So I'll show you some of them in a second. Just to show if you target something, you can make it better. That's the thing we're doing now. We target certain things and we work until it gets better. And we thought one of the ways we need to do it is we need to be able to talk to more people, get more information out there, mobilize people. So we thought, well, email's an easy way to do that, surely. So let's work. How do we do that? So we worked at it, and to be honest, the team that did it, the comms team, well done, guys. They worked for months because it turns out it's extremely difficult to do that. Extremely difficult. But we went, you can see there when we suddenly hit breakthrough and we started to increase significantly. Because when you try things, you find out if they fail or if they work. And if they fail, you don't do them. And if they work, you do them. And you keep doing them. Now, that one is tailed off a bit. The level of increase is because we ran out of money to do it, because it costs money to do these things. So, anyway, we'll get to that later. But you can see we've doubled. So we doubled the number of people. So we can reach 35,000 people. It's a significant number of people. If they've got the motivation that you have, people in our society that is completely brainwashing them, yet we can still reach 35,000 people and mobilize them. And we typically get a conference cancelled because 3 people will contact the organisation. 3. So you can actually tip things just 1 or 2 people. But we've got thousands. Could you move on to the next one, please? Now, this one is an interesting one, because when we looked at this, we thought, well, what would be the easiest group to mobilise? Who should be on our side? And in that discussion, we thought, well, the Catholic Church teaches the most clearly that killing is wrong, abortion is wrong. What if we actually measured how effective we are at getting inside the Catholic Church? And we did things to raise that level. If we could just raise a few % of the number of Catholics who get involved in the pro-life work, we could transform things. So what we did is we benchmarked it and we decided that we could measure a diocese based on 5 factors. So there's 5 factors we do, and based on those 5 factors, we give a score out of 10. And when we started 2 years ago, we found that only 7% of dioceses had a score of over 5. Only 7%. And I thought, wow, that's that's great, because look how much improvement we could bring about. I was trying to be positive that day. So 7% didn't seem a lot, but it made us think, well, actually, if we could raise that, just think how much more we could galvanise and mobilise people. And so we started to move that. So we've now got that at 40%. So we raised that. But then another thing we thought, well, it would be good if we had more members. It would be really amazing if people... ultimately, I think the diocesan score is a cultural thing, so there probably will be a lag between us improving that score and those people then getting more involved. They will be more sensitised to the pro-life message, and over the years they will get more involved. That's the target of that. But right now, we need members. We need people to actually join us and sign up and fund us, get involved in our campaigns, turn up at our events. We need all of those things. And we found that really hard. It's really hard to get folk to commit. You're like, oh, please, I'll pay it for you. Doing all those things. We've tried that. So we come up with this idea of getting ambassadors. And an ambassador is someone who would commit to signing up 10 new members for you, which is quite hard, but probably manageable for some people. There's some people out there who are great at making friends. When I go to Morrison's, my wife goes to the till and is getting served, and she chats away to the person there in deep, really profound conversations. And I just assume it's somebody she went to school with and all the rest of it. And when I come away, oh, what was that? I was like, you've not seen her for years? She went, no, I've never met her before. I was like, she makes better friends at the till at Morrison's than I've made in my whole life. But some people have that capacity. They can get out. So there are people out there. Some of you might be those sorts of people. You could become an ambassador. So look, it was really, really hard. I mean, how long, guys, have we gone about ambassadors? They hated me for it. But I knew we would get breakthrough. So recently, we've really started to hammer ambassadors. So we're aiming to get 100, and we're at 25. So by the end of this year, the target is to get 100 by the end of this year. So if someone nudges you, please... Oh, I should have used that nudge theory on you, but I've told you. I should have had footprints to the ambassador thing up there. Please think of becoming an ambassador. But the staff are all working on things. They are identifying how many pupils do we reach in schools, how many politicians do we engage in. They grade the politicians, how many journalists do we engage with, how many of our members are activists. So we're doing that in so many areas. So there's lots of challenges. There's lots of challenges in the world. We can move off of that slide now. There's the challenges, that's true. But for any great challenge, people are typically willing to do a great amount of work. So Thomas Edison said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And think of that. I didn't want to do many slides. But think of that one, the iceberg, typically is used. You see the tip of the iceberg and you think, oh, that's fine. And then when you see the reality of how much of it is below the surface. And it's the same with another good one I could have used, is that of the podium when you see the Olympians, the gold, silver and bronze. You see that on the day and it's fantastic. But what you don't see is all that effort, all the pain, all the training, the injuries they've had through the season. You don't see all of that. So victory can be won, but it does need our dedication. It needs our persistence. And we will have failure. But we learn from the failures and we advance and we try and make sure. And if we're measuring it, we can see if it's going in the right direction. That's the sort of effort that is needed. As I say, that we need to realise that this is a winnable game. People will contend for something if they think it's a winnable game. But what I felt when I took on the job at SPUC was I felt there was a feeling that, well, we'll maybe get a reward at the end. There was we're daunted, we'll just keep going. And I thought, I'm quite an impatient person. I thought, I am not waiting. I'll probably be in trouble for all sorts of other things. I'm not waiting for a reward. I want to win now. Let's win now. Let's identify the paths that take us to victory now, but put in the work to get us there. That's what we need to do. This weekend, hopefully you will see how we're trying to do that. You know, the stuff that we're doing, our youth work. If you speak to the staff that do that, the stuff we're doing with the drama and film, you'll hear about that. The outreach to universities, the social media work we do, the YouTube work that we do, that Catherine fronts for us, the targeting that we do in Parliament, the events that we do, the reaching out to politicians and nurturing them. We're doing all of that sorts of things. And in each of those areas, we're building a critical mass. And think of all of you here today. You're all part of that. You're all part of that mechanism that will change it for the masses. Toynbee was right. It's minorities that change history. It's a few people who absolutely believe, who can influence their friend, whether it's getting ambassadors, whether it's writing letters for us, whether it's being a white flower speaker for us. There's easy, simple things you do, whether it's even being informed, so that when someone's talking about the issue, you know that the truth about it because you've got it from our media briefings or from our website. At the heart of what we're doing, we know the truth of our vision. We know that every abortion ends an innocent human life, and we know that it damages women, and it destroys and darkens consciences. That's why when you deaden a human conscience, you lead us into a new period of barbarism. That is what we're undergoing. And society now is to justify abortion, they know that they need to lie. They know that they need to shut down the truth. They know that they need to stop us speaking. And as they do it, their consciences are darkening because they're getting used to doing it. They're getting used to silencing the voice of conscience within them. And the more they do that, the darker our world will become. So for all the virtue signalling you're seeing in society, we are, if you read carefully what's going on, we are moving into a dog-eat-dog world where they're merciless, where if people do something wrong, the mob comes to crush them, to cancel them. They will not forgive them. We've grown up in a culture that knew the weakness of human nature, that knew that human beings can fail and get things wrong, and therefore they needed to be supported with a culture that made it easy to be good, and it made it less easy to be bad. Now it's the other way around. It's hard to be good because you will be denounced. Don't be so judgmental. But it's very easy to be bad. You're induced, and the salesmen who try to promote the bad are very good at it. But that's what we've got to do. We've got to mobilise. Now, there's a rule of thumb in business, and that is if you hit a target, your next target beyond that can be 150% of that target. So think of a series of dominoes that get bigger and bigger and bigger. If we get one target, choose the right target, get that, then the next target, the next target. That's what the LGBT movement did. They've written a paper. There's a really interesting short summary of it called The Overhauling of Straight America. But they talk about the salami process. Just get people to go a slice at a time. Because people go, oh, okay, I'll move a wee bit. And before you know it, a few decades and they've moved miles. That's what we need to do. But we need to do the right things. We need to target the right issues. So we're assessing that just now. What are the issues that are the weak spots of the abortion movement? You know, so we've got things about how they undermined human rights, the harm of abortion, how it's undermined Hippocratic ethics in medicine, how it's not about a woman's choice, and even if it were, you know, the amount of coercion in abortion is quite incredible. The fact that our NHS is investing in the demise of our society. We need to choose some of these issues and hammer at them. It's like a siege. There is an empire of evil dedicated to abortion, and we've got to find some of the weak spots in that, and we've got to hammer at them and bring them down. That's how we'll bring down the whole edifice. We could attack all round, but we would exhaust the resources. But we've got to call people to get involved, and each of you can play a part. People want to do something better with their life. Now, John F. Kennedy, for all you know about his history or whatever, he did inspire people. But it's because he called the American people at that time to something greater. He said to them, think not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That inspired people. They want to do something better, and that's what we offer in the pro-life movement. A better world where every life is precious and respected. We can do that. Now, just to finish off, there was another episode in Kennedy's life that was interesting. He was visiting NASA headquarters, and when he was walking about, it was late on at night, and there was a janitor there, and the janitor's sweeping away, and he went over and said, "Whoa, what are you doing in here so late?" And he said, "Oh, Mr. President, I'm helping put a man in the moon." Because he knew that every single person has a role. Every single person can play their part, and all of those parts are vital. And all of you today, please look at the friends you can make here today. Be part of this movement. We will make abortion unthinkable if we do it together. Thank you.